Corey Haines, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm so excited and honored.
Let's dive straight into it. Is Product Hunt still worth it?
It is, but maybe not as much as it used to be, unfortunately. It's so funny because I've seen so many, we were just talking about counterexamples and how everyone has a mixed experience. And I think Product Hunt used to be one of those things that was just a tried and true, like you're stupid not to do it, essentially, type of marketing strategy. And but things have changed in the last couple of years. They got acquired by AngelList. They had a couple of new leadership people in the CEO role and CTO role. They've heavily tried to monetize as well, right? So it's kind of a classic story of just what happens after a company gets acquired, essentially. And it used to be sort of all merit-based, and it was kind of the Wild West. You could post, you could launch, and it was really just up to the community to determine the rankings for the day. And if you got to that number one or even like the top 5 spot, you could expect a big surge in traffic, and that traffic would normally result in new business. These days, there's a bit more, we'll call it curation involved in what shows up on the front page. There's also a lot of bots, which is not a secret. It's, I think, up to 60% of all upvotes and traffic are bots on the site. So it's kind of a rampant problem, which makes it easy to game too, unfortunately. This has happened to me as well, where there's been, I was in the top 5 spots or even like the top 3 spots of the day. And then around 10, 11 o'clock at night Pacific time, all of a sudden there's a surge of upvotes from somebody in the 10th position who ends up becoming the first position, which is obviously so, inauthentic that it's frustrating. Top that with the fact that they do some selection of what they think should go on the homepage for that day. And it's a little bit unclear, or it's a lot unclear on what those reasons are and what the criteria is for how you get on the first page. So I've been frustrated with it recently. Although I just saw a guy, Marty, CEO of Agree.com, he managed to secure the number 1 spot and saw a huge surge of traffic. So again, it's not to say that it's not worth it. It's just not as tried and true as it used to be. And you can't rely on it for sure to get you up off the ground.
I know, because I've heard different schools of thought, and some people say if your audience is Product Hunt's audience, then it makes perfect sense. But I've heard other people say it's good for a backlink, and then you just kind of move on with your life and don't sink too much time and effort and hassle into it. But I guess it really does depend, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But, it's good to know that it's maybe not the behemoth that it used to be.
Yeah, you definitely have to diversify, which I think is fine, because a lot of people over-indexed on Product Hunt, and they would that was their whole marketing strategy was, let's just launch and keep launching on Product Hunt, which I've been guilty of as well. So I think it's maybe healthy for founders and for marketers to have to look elsewhere for more long-term sustainable marketing channels and strategies. It's the same exact playbook with a lot of social media platforms where in the early days, you post and then you get this huge exposure and then you get this huge surge of traffic. And then over time, as there's more and more people posting and there's more and more noise, it's harder to reach your followers. And then it feels like it's, not as worth it anymore. Same kind of cycle with something like Product Hunt or any other, future discovery platform you might list on in the future. You're subject to an algorithm and you're subject to their rules. And so you can't cry when they enforce those rules.
Well, listen, while we're still talking about pretty spicy takes, what is your most controversial opinion about building and growing a SaaS business?
Something that I heard a ton, especially when I was at the head of growth at Baremetrics, which is a financial analytics platform for SaaS companies. So I got really, really familiar with metrics and what people look for. And all the time I would hear people quote the classic LTV to CAC ratio. And that was like the one metric that's the most important. And if you can dial that in, then you've figured out growth. And all you need to do is, pour gasoline on the fire and raise some money and invest in marketing, essentially, right? And the rule was something like, as long as you have a 3-to-1 LTV to CAC ratio, then you have a good business, essentially. And I just couldn't agree less, or couldn't disagree more, because LTV is a metric that is not meant for SaaS companies. LTV was originally sort of a metric that was invented to help encapsulate the value created by customers over time over multiple orders. So if you're an e-commerce store, for example, and people buy a shirt and then they buy another shirt and then another shirt, their lifetime value might be 3 times their original purchase, right? And so if you're trying to acquire customers, LTV is helpful to know in that sense, because now you have a little bit more wiggle room to work with to acquire that customer than their first average order value. Now you can account for their second order value or their third or fourth or fifth and so on and so forth. The problem is that logic breaks down with something like a subscription, because in a subscription where there's recurring revenue, recurring value given, for one, there's huge variance. And so with SaaS, you can have plans that start at, $10 a month and go all the way up to $10,000 a month or even more, right? And so the lifetime value is going to be this average that is not going to be representative of what your customer base is really spending with you. So it's better to use a metric like average revenue per account or average revenue per customer, for example. But even then, LTV to CAC is really just a proxy for trying to understand how much can we afford to spend to acquire a customer, which there's another metric that's perfectly suited for that, which is your payback period. And your payback period looks at what is the average revenue per customer and then divides that by the amount that you're spending on your customers. And so the payback period, is like the actual number that you're trying to get at that you need to know for marketing. So okay, is it going to take me 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years to recoup the costs in investing in acquiring this customer? And so LTV to CAC is problematic because with a 3-to-1 ratio, that normally assumes that the LTV is somewhere around 2 years worth of a subscription with somebody. And so a 3-to-1 ratio is actually extremely large, which gives you a huge amount of room to play with the customer acquisition costs that could be, in reality, a 12 to 18 month payback period, which for a lot of businesses means that you need to have 12 to 18 months of cash in the bank just in marketing budget alone to be able to float and to be able to continue investing in acquiring those customers. So a more realistic payback period for most companies is going to be in that 3 to 6 month range. Ideally less than a year. It's kind of like good economics on average, but LTV to CAC is just a kind of a lazy metric. In summary.
Are you assuming like a 2-year customer lifetime in that calculation, or is that just overall across the board? That's a good ratio to aim for. That's a good payback period to aim for.
No, that's what most people assume. In fact, the real calculation that people make is they're essentially dividing by their churn rate, which also is problematic because customers churn out at very, very different levels. And in fact, most churn occurs within the first 30 days. And even beyond that, most of that churn occurs within the first 90 days. And so a lot of these customers that people will be acquiring, again, using that LTV metric, they're never even getting past 3 months with you, which means that you're going to have a really hard time recouping the costs of acquiring that customer. And so then you're making up all those costs with customers that are with you for 3, 4, 5 years, which actually pushes out the payback period of those customers being profitable, right? So all the ways that you calculate LTV for SaaS are problematic. It just shouldn't be a metric that's used.
Hey, it's Ryan here. I'm glad you're enjoying the video. Listen, if you want to meet me or some of the people that I interview, you should really join the Startup Source SaaS Founder community. It's a private Slack group for SaaS founders based outside of Silicon Valley who are past the idea stage and want to focus on growth. About 30% of our members are doing over $1 million a year in revenue, so it's a pretty high caliber group. You'll get access to regular mastermind calls and workshops, and every week we share exclusive marketing tactics and resources that you can use to grow your business faster. So, if you want to give yourself an unfair advantage and learn from other SaaS founders who are 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, head over to startupsource.com and sign up. I think there's a link in the description down below as well. Anyway, I'll see you in there. Are there any other metrics that SaaS founders typically get wrong, or maybe they overemphasize or underemphasize? Or is that the most egregious kind of example you can think of?
That one's definitely the most egregious, but definitely churn or retention, whichever way you want to view those. because like I just mentioned, one of the big things that I would always look at when I was analyzing people's dashboards within Baremetrics was their cohort retention chart, which shows, hey, for all the customers that you acquired this month, when do they churn out? At month 1, 2, 3, 12, 24, month 36, for example. And so people might think that they're okay because they have a 6% churn rate, for example. But what they don't realize is that, all their customers are churning out at month, 7 or 8, for example. And so again, they might not even be recouping the value of acquiring those customers. And even then, if we were to segment each of those cohorts per month based on their plan, you might find that there's drastically different churn rates per cohort. So you might find that your $10 customers are churning out 3 times faster than your $100 a month customers, for example. So they're just, this is the problem with averages. Averages lie, right? If we took me and Elon Musk's net worth and we average it out, it would be in the billions. But I am nowhere close to being a billionaire, right? And that's the problem with a lot of these metrics, is that you take these really extraordinary numbers on the top end and then a lot of numbers on the bottom end as well, and neither of them are close to the number that you think you're measuring of.
Absolutely. Well, why don't we zoom out a little bit? For anyone who hasn't met you before, Corey, can you tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I've spent my entire professional career in SaaS marketing. I started as the first marketing hire for a startup here in San Diego, and then got hired on full time, bounced around a few times, including Baremetrics, where I was the head of growth. Did a lot of consulting after COVID, a lot of freelancing. I built a newsletter called Swipe Files and started teaching courses and doing a lot of different coaching and just a lot of consulting in different capacities. And then about a year and a half ago, I started my agency. It's called Conversion Factory, and we do product marketing for SaaS companies, but we do it with a little bit of a twist. So we don't have any contracts, any billable hours, any of that kind of jazz. We have fixed prices, which are basically like a monthly retainer, but we have a very specific workflow that's based on the kind of tasks model of 1 at a time, 2 at a time, or 3 at a time, where we can do everything from copywriting to branding, websites, emails, conversion optimization for SaaS companies.
There's a really famous statistic in the world of SaaS marketing, and it goes like only 4% of SaaS businesses make it to $1 million a year in annual recurring revenue, and only 0.4% make it to $10 million a year. What are those businesses getting right that the other 96% are missing in your experience?
The first one, which is so easy and not easy to deduce and not marketing related at all, is just product market fit. It's really hard, it turns out, to build something that people want and or will switch to from what they're currently, or switch from what they're currently using. So if we just kind of take that out of the equation, the other big problem I see a lot of startups make is they never establish a sustainable marketing channel. They're so reliant on these kind of, silver bullet hopefuls and these quick, cheap, flash in the pan type of marketing tactics. And so they're launching a product-a-ton and they're tweeting and they're, trying to strike a deal. They're doing a little bit of outreach. They might host a webinar once in a while, but they're all these kind of fickle tactics that are sporadic and don't really have a lot of purpose or strategy behind them. And none of them compound whatsoever. So for the products that do find product market fit, that's just step one, right? Then you have to build a sustainable marketing engine behind it. You need ways to predictably get customers and acquire them. And those companies are the ones that actually find channels that work, right? They're not just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And there are no silver bullets, that those don't exist, but they're investing in marketing channels. They find something like SEO, they find an ad channel, they find some sort of tactic. Even if that is posting on social media, they go all in on it, right? And they really exploit it for all that it's worth. And that's something that I see a lot of people mistake, is I think that they can just kind of dabble with a bunch of little things. That works up into a certain point, maybe up to like 10K in MRR, let's just say at best, where you can really get away with just sporadically doing random things. But beyond that, you're just never going to have big enough numbers to get the growth that you want to. Like you can't get around that. The numbers will never be big enough. You will never get enough traffic. You will never get enough leads. You will never get enough new customers per month using these kind of sporadic flash in the pan tactics. You have to be able to invest in a strategy that scales sustainably and profitably, ideally. There's a lot of VC-backed startups that will just kind of throw money at the problem, and they get enough growth to continue and to raise the next round and keep kind of subsidizing this customer acquisition. And then maybe eventually they figure out a way to do it profitably. But especially for companies that haven't raised very much or haven't raised at all, you have to do it profitably essentially from the start, which is really, really difficult. So I don't blame the numbers there that only 4% make it past $1 million in ARR.
I can't tell you how many times I've done coaching or consulting with a SaaS business, and they've said, "Yeah, so we've got this channel working over here." And I said, "Well, have you fully exploited that? Why don't you just do more of that? Oh, but we want to do this other thing instead, or we want to get ads working. We want to get this other channel working." It's like, just do the thing that's already working. Why do you need to go out? But I think a lot of founders sort of get trapped in this mindset of, we need to do everything. Do you have a bit of a favored playbook when it comes to what channels to focus on, which order to do things? Like, is there a sort of a set best way to grow a SaaS business in your experience?
There's no silver bullets. What you need is a kind of systematic way of exploring which channels might be worth investing in, and then experimenting with them until they've proven to be these scalable channels that you can really go all in on, right? And now start to pour a lot of money and time and effort into. I think that people have a hard time with it because, especially a lot of founders in SaaS come from a product background, right? So they're technical, they code, they just built a cool thing, or they have this cool idea, and now they have to do something that they have never been familiar with, which is, to spread the word and to get people to actually look at this and use it at scale, right? And I didn't fully understand that struggle until I learned to code. And then I built an app, and then I tried to market it. And then I realized, I can see what the disconnect is here now. Because in coding, everything is completely deterministic. It's, I put in this input, and every single time I'm going to get this output. And depending on how many inputs you have or the scale of those inputs is always proportionate to the outputs that you can expect, right? And marketing is the exact opposite. It's basically a slot machine. You're playing the lottery. You need to find a good slot machine is what you need. A slot machine that hits, once every 3 times instead of once every 3,000 times. But that's really, really tough. And so I talk to technical founders all the time, and they see marketing as if it's a deterministic problem. And they think, okay, well, if I just write X number of blog posts, I should get Y number of customers. And if I pour X amount into this newsletter sponsorship, I should get Y number of trials. And that's just not how it works, unfortunately. I really, really wish that it did. I would be a billionaire by now. I think a lot of us would be. But you have to experiment, and you have to make all these tweaks and refinements to keep kind of manipulating the slot machine, if you will, to get better and better odds and to hit more and more often as you go. So it's probably not going to hit the first time or the second time, but as you go, you're supposed to be able to hit more and more often. Personally, I like to start with channels that I think are most likely to hit the most often. Like, why play on hard mode when you can play on easy mode? So sales is one of those things where you're just doing direct outreach, and there's definitely a little bit more deterministic approach that you can take with it, right? Where if I have a good sales pitch and I'm reaching the right people and I can send emails out at scale or connect on LinkedIn at scale, I can expect X number of calls to be booked, or trials to be created, et cetera, and so forth. And it's great because it's usually free-ish, and it involves your time. And so it's good to do early on. And it's sort of one of those why not strategies. Similar to Product Hunt, it's like, if you're not doing some sort of sales, some sort of outreach, I think you're just lazy because it's available for everybody. One of the other ones that I think is really tried and true is SEO. And it's so funny because everybody always wants to talk about SEO and how it doesn't work as well as it used to. And now with AI, it's like, is SEO even going to be a thing anymore? And it's like, we've been talking about this for decades now. Is search still viable, and is search still yes, and it always will be. Let's stop trying to like give ourselves excuses that we don't need to do this anymore, because it's always going to be there. In fact, just a little tangent on the AI bit. So many people are like, oh, like Perplexity and ChatGPT are replacing Google. That's not true, because where do you think Perplexity and Google are getting all their information from, and how they're ranking their suggestions or recommendations for tools, or where they're getting their citations, right? I think actually SEO is only going to become more important, because it's going to be the number one thing you can control for the AI driven search solutions, and the AI chatbots, and the AI research tools, and so on and so forth. But anyways, I digress. I love SEO because it's the only source of free and recurring traffic. No other channel is free and recurring. In fact, most of the recurring or maybe more predictable sources of traffic are all paid. It's pay to play, Google, PPC, Meta ads, LinkedIn, newsletter sponsorships, where, you put some money in and you can expect a certain number of impressions or clicks or conversions, if you want to call it that, over time. But SEO is one of the only ones where it has that predictability and it's free. And the great thing is that it compounds over time. So the more that you invest in it, you don't see the results right away, but as time goes on, you get more and more return out of that investment over time. There's still ads. I think that it's more and more expensive every day, but ads are still a great channel. There's partnerships, and partnerships can come in a lot of different varieties, between affiliates, white labeling, agency kind of relationships where they're maybe more of a service provider or an implementer. You can have kind of co-marketing relationships with other technology providers and other SaaS companies. But those are usually like the four that I go for first, because they're the best slot machines that I've tried.
It's amazing. I think great minds think alike, because the standard sort of playbook that I've always kind of operated with is you start off with cold outbound, email, LinkedIn messages, DMs on social media, whatever it is, depending on your target customer. Again, because it's cheap and it's super targeted. And the other cool thing about that I think gets really underestimated a lot of the time is you don't really need to have your funnel fully figured out at that point. Like early on, your website probably looks terrible. Your messaging probably isn't quite hitting the mark. You don't really have product market fit yet, and you've got to go and get customers. So you need something that is fast and cheap and relatively targeted. And there aren't many other channels out there that tick all three of those boxes, but it's a lot harder to scale, which is where, like you're saying, the SEO and the content stuff comes into place. So I've always kind of recommended starting off with cold outreach. While you've got the cold outreach happening and you're getting to talk to customers and you're refining the messaging and you're figuring out, you're doing all the validation as you go, as well as the sales. It's kind of, two sides of the same coin. And then you start building up all the content in the background, and you start working on SEO in the background, because the SEO has a lot of things going for it, but it's slow, even if you do everything the right way. Actually, I was talking to, that's probably an interesting segue. I was talking to a guy named Lars Lofgren. I'll stick a link up there somewhere.
Legend.
He's awesome. So he was the head of marketing at Baremetrics for a while. Now runs his own thing. He was saying how he built an affiliate business that made $7.2 million a year, and then it all fell apart. So on the one hand, it's like that's got to suck. But in his view, he thinks that SEO has kind of turned into a bit of the Wild West at the moment. Not so much in SaaS. Like he said, if you're building a SaaS business, you can make lots of different channels work if you've got like an actual business with an actual brand. Affiliate land, it's a little bit harder, but he said the biggest impact on SaaS companies is that a lot of affiliate channels have dried up because they were the ones relying on SEO, and now that's gotten a lot more difficult and a lot more consolidated. And AI and Reddit and everything else is changing that. Have you noticed much of an impact in SEO land for SaaS, or what always worked will continue to work?
No, there's definitely been an impact. Like everything, it's always evolving and it's always changing. The big thing that I think a lot of people, I think this is easier for me because I didn't I'm sort of new enough to the game and that I don't remember the good old days when SEO was so easy. You know what I mean? And I think that's where a lot of people, especially people who are, doing SEO in the 2000s or 2010s, early 2010s, where it just felt pretty reliable, predictable. There were a lot of things you could do to basically game the Google algorithm and the rankings to be in your favor. And today, I don't know if the Wild West is how I would describe it, but I would say it's definitely saturated for sure, which means that the quality just goes up and it becomes harder to know what is really going to move the needle to get you from position 10 to position 1, for example. It's just hyper competitive. And AI doesn't help, especially with the Gemini, generated search results and kind of summaries, things like that. I mean, the other thing is like a lot of the people that have been impacted the most by SEO are the ones that were creating the content that was the easiest to disrupt. And what I mean by that was like it was the most top of funnel. It was the information that required the least amount of expertise. It was information that was easily copyable and that, very quickly satisfied a search intent. What hasn't been impacted whatsoever have been a lot of bottom of funnel type of keywords, more commercial intent keywords, SEO that is pretty niche, right? That isn't so hyper competitive where we're trying to go after keywords that are, a keyword difficulty of 80 and have 50,000 searches a month. Where if you're playing in the like keyword difficulty 10 to 30 range and the keywords are generating, 50 to 5,000 searches per month, nothing has really changed all that much because that's still very reliant on having good expertise, good best practices. People are doing a lot of education for themselves, right? So they're going to be clicking through 1, 2, 3, maybe even 10 search results as opposed to just the first one and then quickly bouncing and going on with their day, right? So of course it's changed, of course it's evolved, but I just think that this goes on with like a lot of the silver bullets and growth hacks that people used to rely on. Listen, I am a huge fan of growth hacks. I just think that it's incredibly hard to actually find them these days and or rely on them because then they get exploited and they disappear so quickly. You know what I mean? There were growth hacks people used to rely on with like, oh, we have this loop and this flywheel of like, if this was embedded on someone's site and then they saw it and it was the powered by, then everybody started doing that and then that lost all of its juice. Fill in the blank with any other kind of mainstream growth hack people have used. And it's just harder to make it work. Not to say that there won't be any in the future, but part of me feels like, guys, let's just go back to the basics. Let's stop looking for the easy things. Stop looking for excuses on like how to make your job easy. Like the job is going to be hard. You have to like fight for customers these days. So I don't know. I don't like complaining about the current state of things. It's like, well, the game changed. Sorry, but evolve or get left behind.
It's interesting that you say the over-reliance on growth hacks because I can't tell you how many times someone said, oh, well, Airbnb did this and, Wise did that or eBay did this, like there's Tinder did this when they were first starting out. And it's like, cool. A, that's a consumer company, not a B2B SaaS. So very, very different story. And B, it doesn't work for this reason. And C, that was a long time ago and you can't do that anymore. And like all that stuff comes along. I think I had a mentor once who said that there's no such thing as a silver bullet. There's just a shitload of lead bullets. And I think that's been
yeah.
Sounds like that's true in your experience. That's been true in my experience. I did want to ask you about SEO. We might move on to a couple of other channels in a moment, but I did want to ask you about SEO a little bit more. So I interviewed a guy recently who was talking about SEO for SaaS. And he said that the interesting thing about SaaS SEO is that most SaaS businesses have a bit of an ace up their sleeve. And that is you've quite often got access to customer data, like, what if you've got an email tool, you've got, what the average response rate is on emails. You've got access to this wealth of information by virtue of the fact that your customers are using your product and you're tracking their usage of it. So you've got access to some some proprietary information that most other people don't have. So you've got this unique angle when it comes to creating content that other companies can't easily replicate. So you can't just like use ChatGPT to write a blog post about it because only you have that information. Are there any other sort of unique advantages that you think SaaS businesses have, or any tactics when it comes to SEO that SaaS businesses could probably be taking advantage of at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's no silver bullet, it's no growth hack, but I've been really big on programmatic SEO for the last couple of years, and I feel like nobody can agree on what that means, which is annoying because I feel like it's not that complicated. But really, programmatic SEO versus traditional SEO it just means that the pages or the page content is generated programmatically. And programmatically doesn't mean necessarily using AI. It could be using AI or it could be augmented by AI, but it doesn't have to be AI. And now everybody just assumes that it just means AI. And then they think, oh, also all you're doing is pinging ChatGPT to write a shitty blog post and then publishing 1,000 of those per day. It's like, no, that's definitely not what I'm advocating for. That is exactly how you get your whole site tanked and flagged by Google and you never rank for anything ever again. There are so many fun, cool playbooks with the programmatic SEO that a lot of other industries have exploited and utilized that SaaS companies haven't. I'm looking at a bunch in front of me right now, so I'll just list them off. But like, you can generate programmatically templates. You can curate lists. You can do conversions of something to another. You can do comparisons between tools or products or services. You can show examples, and that can be text examples, video examples, screenshots, images, things that are AI generated as well. We can do location-based curated things. We can do pages that are based off of personas. We can do integrations like Zapier did, for example. We can do a glossary, which bleeds into maybe that like auto-blogging, ChatGPT, crappy blog posts, but not quite. And I'll explain maybe what that means here in a second. But you can just do a glossary of terms and definitions, essentially. You can do translations. You can do a directory of things. You can do profiles of people and companies. There are so many playbooks. These are, 12 playbooks that I've kind of listed out because I've been really curious about this and trying to teach it more often. But so many things other than just AI-generated blog posts, right? And the real magic behind programmatic SEO is, for example, using proprietary data that only your SaaS company can create to create unique content that can't really be copied. People could copy it, but that's like sort of illegal, right? If you're just copying words and advice, it's hard to, do some sort of copyright infringement or whatever it is. But if they're copying your data and the source of your data, that's something that companies are gonna have to be more careful of. So it's definitely more of a moat. And there's all sorts of ways to do that where, between templates, between comparisons, between examples, the data that you curate that is from third-party sources or first-party sources, doesn't matter. There are so many cool opportunities, and the magic is you can generate this content programmatically. So it's all assembled from a database. It's structured in rows and in columns. That's all that it means. And you can publish hundreds or even thousands all in one fell swoop. And there are some people that will say, oh, you need to, batch the publishing and kind of drip them out over time so Google doesn't penalize you. There's no evidence for that whatsoever. That's what people think. Sure, if you want to be cautious, you could do that. But one of the great advantages of programmatic SEO is that you can publish so much content in day one so that 6 months or 12 months down the line, they've had 6 to 12 months to gain in the rankings and to get indexed and to build backlinks and all these other things. The problem with a lot of traditional content marketing is that if you have 52 blog posts that you want to publish that year, you have to do one per week, and you don't receive any of the value of the blog post that you published in week 52 until probably week 104, right? If you can publish all your blog posts on week 1, then by the time week 52 rolls around, now they're actually getting traffic and generating leads and creating customers for you, right? So programmatically, you can create this content so much faster and get them to market so much quicker. And so I've seen it work quite a few times. Again, it's not a silver bullet, but it also appeals to more technical people, which I think is fun. It's pretty much free. Again, SEO is a source of free and recurring traffic. It's pretty magical. I've done this for 2 of my sites, and years later, they're the biggest drivers of traffic for those sites. Even though day one they weren't, obviously. No piece of content you publish, the day later is going to. But now they're generating tens of thousands of visitors per month, completely on autopilot, and they're going to continue to because they're the most unique and best pieces of content for that keyword. Just to give you an example really quick to make this more tangible, for one of my Chrome extensions that I built, it's called Swipewell. It helps build a swipe file of landing pages, emails, ads that you want to curate for yourself. And so I saw that there was all these patterns of people searching for SaaS landing page examples, e-commerce landing page examples, book landing page examples, so on and so forth, right? They all followed a very similar pattern. They were all searching for examples. And I was like, oh, I have all that in my swipe file. I should just figure out a way to get these onto a page, right? So I spent a month and I organized over 6,000 unique pieces of media, screenshots, published them into over 300 pages. And now they dominate because all the other examples in the search results are like, here's 6 examples. And I'm like, here's 400. You know what I mean? Like good luck catching up to me using your blog posts, right? You can't create the best content without doing it programmatically in this instance. And there's lots of other examples of that, again, with templates, with conversions, with locations. Like this content should be generated programmatically. So why aren't we? Because the tooling hasn't been there. And that's why I'm building a tool around it, but I won't plug myself.
Oh, no, you should. Please do. And I'll stick a link in the description. But come on, we're talking about SaaS and marketing. I expect you to plug your marketing SaaS. Yes.
If you want the name, it's called Commence. Commence with a Z. There's a link in the description. You can see it there. Fantastic.
That's the way. I was just wondering, just before we move on to some other marketing stuff I was going to ask you about, what's the really kind of stripped down, bare bones, my first programmatic SEO attempt? What does that look like? Is that a Google sheet with a bunch of columns? And how would you do that for someone who's never done this before, is totally new to programmatic SEO?
There's a couple of approaches that I've seen. Number one is if you are a programmer, you can basically spin up an app where you can set up a new database or a new schema. So it's a separate kind of table. And then you just start curating data in there and use that to generate the pages from your app. Because basically the way that a lot of modern frameworks work is, you can automatically programmatically generate pages based on records in a database, right? And that's, at the end of the day, what you want to do. So some people will set up an app just for these programmatic pages and then do some, DNS proxy magic to stick that on their website. And it might be on a subdomain, or maybe they found a way to put it on the root domain, but it doesn't really matter. Another approach is you can use a static site generator. And so it doesn't have to be maybe like a database of content, but you just need a CSV file of markdown files or markdown pages. In other words, the content is structured with markdown, and then you just have a huge folder full of files that are each can be turned into a stylized page. That's another approach I've seen work really well. The third approach is you use an Airtable, a Google Sheet, what's the third one I've been seeing recently? There's a couple other no-code database tools that are kind of popular these days, but Airtable and Google Sheets are definitely the 2 big ones. And then you can hook those up to a Webflow or a WordPress, for example, and you're really just tying and mapping together, CMS items to rows in a database, in Airtable or Google Sheets. What we're doing with Commence is we're essentially like a website builder, a CMS, where you can bring in your data from Airtable, Google Sheets, or via API. So we handle all the front end side of things, so you can just publish directly onto your website on the root domain. all you have to do is bring your own data, essentially. It's kind of a BYOD approach. But that's definitely the simplest way. Like the most no-code, easy way is to do like an Airtable plus commence, Airtable plus Webflow, because then you don't have to deal with any of the raw code itself. And updating is really hard too, right? If you want to add a new record, you don't want to have to like re-upload all 1,000 of your markdown files, or you don't want to have to like spin up your app, run all of your updates, make sure your database is in sync, and then click publish. So I'm a little bit biased, but I think the Airtable and Google Sheets are the way to go. And then using a Webflow or Commence on the front end.
Fantastic. I want to change tack a little bit now. I want to kind of turn the clock back a little bit to when you were the head of growth at Baremetrics. Do you have any war stories, battle scars, anything that you tried to do that didn't work so well? Because I think sometimes, when there's podcasts like this, people kind of talk about what works really well, what's, very happy, sunshine and rainbows and everything else. But sometimes the best lessons are from things that didn't work out so well. So what didn't work for you when you were at Baremetrics, and what did you learn from it?
One that I thought that was going to be really promising was setting up an affiliate program, because there's all sorts of fractional CFOs and growth consultants and agencies that need the data that Baremetrics provides, that we thought like, oh, well, if people aren't using Baremetrics and if they're engaging with a service provider, like one of those types of archetypes, then we can incentivize them to always set them up with Baremetrics. And so set it up, had a pretty generous commission rate and terms and conditions. The affiliate program made it really easy to generate a unique link and does the tracking really well. There's a portal, the whole nine, right? Did a ton of outreach and got a lot of people to sign up for the affiliate program. Had a couple people even do some kind of big blasts and promotions, and never generated a single customer from the affiliate program.
That's a killer.
And I think why is because it's a lot harder to make affiliate programs work when all the promotion is just reliant on these kind of like broadcast blasts from other people. It's a lot easier when, like we were talking about earlier, people have like a blog and they're recommending you as the number one solution for email marketing software for e-commerce companies, for example. And now there's just a little affiliate link there instead of a branded link, right? And there weren't a lot of people blogging about things related to what Baremetrics did or around SaaS financial analytics or anything like that. And so, and in fact, we had a really good SEO presence. So we didn't even need that real estate. You know what I mean? One of the other things that can be really good for an affiliate program is if you're trying to do kind of what's called parasite SEO, where you're getting listed in other people's blog posts and content that rank really high in the search results for competitive keywords, is you can be like, hey, I can incentivize you to make us number one, or just to put us on the list in the first place by here's an affiliate link, right? And that just wasn't a thing within our space, our ecosystem. I think too, it depends a lot on how people normally buy products like yours. So for Baremetrics, a lot of people, didn't even look into something like Baremetrics until one, they started generating revenue, and two, until they started generating some revenue. And even then it was such a quick Google search away. And it was so easy to comparison shop because all you had to do was start a trial, hook up your Stripe account, and then you could start a trial with Baremetrics, StripeMogul, Profitwell, X, Y, and Z all at the same time, and then pick the one that you wanted to, right? There wasn't a lot of like work involved with getting set up like there would be with a email marketing platform or a website builder or some of these other types of tools where once someone clicks through that affiliate link, they're highly likely to convert. The odds were pretty low. So I think, for a number of reasons, just never worked and killed it after several months.
I think that's really important because it sort of goes to show that there is a bit of a recurring theme here. There is no silver bullet when it comes to SaaS marketing. So let's do a bit of a deep dive into conversion rate optimization, copywriting, A/B testing, all that kind of stuff. How do you approach doing conversion rate optimization, if a client came to you and said, hey, we need to get conversions up, what do you do step by step to be able to do that?
The first thing that I always look at is their core positioning, which is kind of funny because it has nothing to do with real CRO or, A/B testing or anything that is very data driven. But from what I found with SaaS, like your conversion rate isn't an accident. It's sort of that way for a number of reasons. And if we were to look at essentially the hierarchy of all the reasons that influence someone's conversion rate, at the top of like the easiest things to fix would be like, well, your copy sucks or your design sucks, or there's like hardly any information on the page, or something within your onboarding flow is broken, right? Those are all really low hanging fruit, right? And if we were to go all the way down the hierarchy to like, this is the most core, hard to measure, but actually does influence conversions the most, it would actually be your positioning. And by positioning, I mean, why do people choose your product? Especially compared to competitors, but just in general, why do people choose your product versus any of the other alternatives that are out there? And what is the urgency behind it? Why do they need your product or a product like yours? And so a lot of people just don't have very good positioning. And I don't blame them because it's very philosophical. It's very hard to dial in your positioning. And what I find happens with a lot of SaaS companies is that they start with, we're going to start to nail this problem, for example. And then by the time that they get to some sort of semblance of product market fit, they veered off that path just enough to where now they're not really sure what problems they solve exactly. They just know that people are paying them money. And so they don't know how to describe, this is why someone should choose us, and or this is how we compare to our competitors. And these are the problems that people pay us to solve for them on a very, very specific level versus just, we help people make more money, save money, or save time, right? Which are kind of like the big three of all business value propositions. So I look at positioning, and then if we can tackle their positioning and that influences the copy on the website, then, normally that has some sort of effect. It either improves conversions or it decreases conversions. Basically, I mean, I don't want to like knock on wood. I don't want to jinx myself, but every time that I've done that exercise and I've redone the copy on the website, conversions have gone up. And that's normally just because, again, it's a little bit muddy on the website and the copy isn't great because it wasn't built on a good foundation of good positioning. Now, once we have good positioning, now it's about dialing in the copy and or dialing in our targeting for the marketing itself. So to give you a couple examples, one client that we worked with, they're in a very, very competitive space. They're a CRM, and they have lots and lots of people starting trials every single month, but the trial conversion rate isn't amazing. And they came to us with kind of a hard demand in that they didn't want to change the website too much, or they didn't want to completely redo the homepage. So I said, okay, that's fine. Why don't we just add to the homepage? Why don't we just create some additional sections? So we led with a new hero section that was just basically inserted right above their old hero section, became the new hero section, and tested out a new big kind of H1 with an outcome-based headline, a couple of pieces of social proof, and that turned out to improve conversions for them by lifted about 20%. Whoa. We have another client, for example, that was like, we don't want to change anything about the core things our product does. We just want to change who we target. So instead of being for everybody, we narrowed it down into one persona in particular, and that improved conversions by about 17%. So it varies so much because there's no silver bullets with CRO. You can't just be like, oh, make the button bigger or redder, or just include these things on the website. It totally depends on the product, but with that process of positioning first, and then we go to the copy, and then we go to the targeting, the personas, that's normally like the 3 steps that we take to figure out how we can move the needle for them.
And in that order of preference, is that because positioning is likely to have the biggest impact, all the way through to
Yeah.
a decreasing amount of impact. It's interesting. I think Google ran an experiment years ago where they're testing a different shade of blue on the button. And you sit there thinking, guys, like how much of you must have tested everything else you could possibly think of before the shade of blue is going to move the needle. But I think, are you able to share your screen with us? Can you show us like what does a good SaaS homepage or landing page look like? And can you maybe kind of talk us through why you've chosen the elements and how you've arranged them and the thought process behind it all?
Yeah. And maybe this is a good opportunity to open up a little bit of a larger conversation around like what makes good copy on the website too. Because even if you have pretty good positioning, like I said, step number 2 is then to really look at the copy and experiment with a lot of different variations, but also just think about the raw ingredients. I led a workshop on this last night actually with a group here in San Diego. And I made the analogy that like, if you're trying to bake a chicken casserole and all you have is chicken, right? People are going to be a little bit disappointed. You need all the ingredients to deliver on the promise of what it is that you're giving to somebody. And the problem with a lot of SaaS websites today is that it's just a big hero section, a big long list of features that probably don't really talk about, or that either talk too much about the benefits or not about the benefits whatsoever. And then it sort of just ends with a, newsletter subscription and or a footer. And so it's just a chicken dish. It's not a chicken casserole. I don't think that's like the right analogy, but it's the best I have for now. Maybe you can help me think of some better ones.
I can guarantee that a lot of people watching this and listening to this are going, oh yeah, that's actually what mine looks like.
Yeah. And that's fine because who taught us how to make a good conversion optimized website? Like, who knows? We're all just kind of making up as we go and or copying other people that seem to know what's working for them. So we created this template based on what we've seen work. And this is after a lot of trial and error. And basically, these are all the raw ingredients we found to be the most essential for a high converting website. We also included some like Mad Lib style copy in here so we can kind of fill in the blanks to really just like get started with your copy on your website. We have a big hero with a big outcome oriented headline. We use a couple of different variations of formulas for a lot of these points. We do some objection busting is what we call it, some risk reversal here. We normally only have 1 or 2 primary call to actions on the page. This is usually like a big screenshot or GIF or animated illustration of the product. Time and time again, the data has shown that people want to see the product. They don't want to see cutesy little artsy abstractions and illustrations. They don't want to see stock photography. They want to see the product. So just show the product. And if your product is ugly, fix that. You know what I mean? Like if you don't want to show it on the website, that's going to be a problem. It doesn't need to be the most beautiful thing in the world, but it just, can't be super, super ugly.
I think just on that, there's, I think a lot of SaaS founders would say that, well, hold on, like if I show a lot of SaaS businesses, if you show the product, it is just a dashboard and without any real context. Is there like is there usually like a bit of a sweet spot for showing it off? Should you show something with like some graphs or some data or some movement or some colors? I don't buy that. You don't buy that?
No. And here's the thing. So this too is, when we're talking about making a big promise, a big outcome oriented headline, like never have to deal with X again, or move the needle in your business in this very specific way. Show a screenshot of how your product helps them get that outcome, right? Don't just show them the dashboard. The dashboard is like the least impactful part of the whole product. Show the product in action. Show the steps or the features or the things that lead to getting this outcome. The same goes for the rest of the page, and I'll walk you through it here in a second. But it shouldn't just be like a random assortment of things that you show about your product. They all need to be tied back to your copy, right? And that's why I'm a big fan of copy first web design, essentially, right? We're not like, yeah, this is a template, but we're not building the design first and then thinking about what we're going to put in it. Makes it easier for us now because we've seen that these are the best ingredients, but we're still completely copy first, and we will change some of these ingredients or at least the presentation of the copy to fit the content that we've created for this based on what we've seen is, or what we think is most appropriate for describing that product. So let me go through some of these ingredients, because it's not going to make sense if I keep talking about all these ingredients, but I don't show it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have a big hero, and then we like to go into a section. We call it the the alternative comparison section. Normally it's oriented around competitors, but what we'll do is we'll kind of summarize and we'll say, hey, you're probably experiencing these problems with the old way of doing things. You probably have this problem, you have this pain, you can't do this, you can't do that, right? And this can be framed in a few different ways: old way versus new way, before versus after, us versus them, the other guys versus us, right? But they're all doing the same thing, where we're trying to distill this down into, hey, there's this like old way of doing things over here, and that probably matches the current way of what you're doing. And you're trying to get their head nodding like, oh yeah, this does kind of suck. And now you're saying very simply, hey, there is a better way for this. So stick around so we can tell you more about what it is and how you actually can achieve that. Now we talk about some of the features. And this is like a very summarized version. I can show you other examples of what this might look like. But normally we're saying, hey, here's everything you need to get this big outcome we're promising in the H1. And then we're listing out the most core and differentiated and novel features out there. We don't need to list all of them. We only need to list all of them that people need to make a purchase decision off of. And normally that's like 4 to 6, for example. Integrations, very, very important. But this one's a little bit more unique, and I stole this from a lot of service provider websites. Is now we go into how it works, because what can happen is we go through all the features, and then people are like, oh, that sounds complicated. That sounds scary. That sounds arduous and time consuming. So now we try to break this down into 3 to 5 steps that say, hey, in order to get the value that you're looking to get, in order to achieve the outcome that you want, all it takes is step 1, 2, 3. Step, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, for example. We try to break it down to make it look really easy, really approachable, not that time consuming. And we're helping them imagine what it looks like to use your software to solve their problems. So it's not like they're not connecting the dots at all. They don't have to interpret, oh, this feature helps me do this, or this is like the life cycle of, from sign up to getting value, what goes in between. We're explaining what goes in between right here. And then we have a final call to action, which again, believe it or not, a lot of companies are missing. They don't ask for the sale, right? It's like at the end of the sales call, you're like, great talking to you, great to meet you. So just like, let me know what you think. No, ask for the sale. Hey, do you want to sign up for this or not? Pay me money, right? This is the time where we're like, okay, now you have all the information that you need. You see how it works. You see all the features. You know why this is better than the alternative way of doing things. Now, are you ready to get started? Please do so now. And that can usually be coupled with more social proof, another screenshot, maybe a friendly, face or picture of the team or the founder, for example. There's a couple other optional sections. We call this the manifesto section. It could be like a more emotionally driven appeal from the founder, where you use more conversational language to rehash everything we've just said on the rest of the page. And of course, we're a huge fan of no code interactive demos, product explainers, little Loom demo videos from the founder, things like this, right, that allow people to see it in action as well. And then we have the footer, right? But these are the raw ingredients. Most people just have this and this. It's only a hero and features. And I was talking about this last night as well, because sometimes it can feel very repetitive, where we're just representing all the same information in different ways, to which I say, yes, that's exactly what it is. Because people skim. People, need that repetition. Consumer psychology says that people need to see the same advertisement 7 times before they will take action on it, right? In other words, you need to be presented with the same compelling information a bunch of times before people are like, okay, I guess I'll click that big button here and get started, right? So this is like square one for what we see makes a high converting website for a SaaS company.
That's awesome. You know what? That how it works section, I don't think I've ever seen a SaaS business do that. And it feels like that's such a winning move because so many SaaS businesses say, hey, we got all these people signing up for a trial, but then they never come back and they never activate and they never use it. And it sort of feels like with that how it works section, if you show them, hey, it's actually really easy, sort of planting the idea in their brain about this is what you need to do to get the outcome, so that when they actually sign up and they're presented, they land in the dashboard, they're not completely lost. They've got a rough idea of what they need to do. I reckon that would really help with onboarding. Have you seen, is that true in your experience?
It's hard to attribute it directly back to this section. But again, what we've seen is compared to just having a hero and features, having a hero, alternative comparison, how it works, integrations, manifesto, all those things definitely do provide a increase in conversions. And we know this too because sometimes we don't do the core positioning work because people don't have the appetite for it. So they just jump straight into, hey, can you write some new-ish copy for us? And so we'll say, okay. And I'll go through and I will rehash all the same information they have on their website, but present it differently using sections like this. And we've seen an increase in conversions. So I think that it works like in theory because we're priming them on what to expect. And now they have a roadmap for once they start a trial, they know what to expect and they're more likely to continue down that road because it's not this ambiguous path in order to reach their desired outcome. But now we've laid it out. Oh, all it is step 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm at step 2. Now I just have to do step 3 and step 4 before getting the outcome that I paid for.
And just to rehash, those 2 optional sections that you mentioned, would you include them at the bottom of the page or would you use them elsewhere? Where would you work them in?
Yeah, they can go anywhere. Normally, what I like to do is with the final call to action, I'll have the manifesto right before or right after because it's such an emotionally charged message that's more of like from a person versus this corporate entity that is your brand and your company. That seems to help. And with the product demo, it's usually the very last thing that we show or it's the very first thing below the hero. And that just depends on the product and how much we feel like people need to see it in order for it to click for them. Companies or products where it's a little bit more of like an established market, we'll usually put it at the end because people have a preconceived notion about how it works and what it does. But if it's a brand new type of tool, we'll usually put it at the beginning because now we're giving them an opportunity to have that aha moment quicker versus having to, read and consume all the information and connect the dots for them. But a lot of these elements are very rearrangeable. For example, we've also do the how it works section a lot of times before the core features if we feel like they're likely to be overwhelmed with the number of features or how complex the features are. So this definitely isn't like a linearly organized, it has to be this order. You can definitely rearrange a lot of the elements.
And when we were talking about A/B testing before, just to kind of scratch that itch a little bit more, if you were A/B testing a new version of the homepage or you're changing some elements around, how do you decide how much traffic before, yes, this is definitely a winner, or no, we need to keep running this experiment for a little bit longer? How large does the sample size need to be, and how do you go about making those decisions?
Yeah, there's some like calculators you can find if you just Google like statistical significance calculator that are pretty tried and true. I will say that normally those will give you numbers that are pretty astonishingly large. You're like, wow, I need to get 100,000 visitors. Like this is going to take me a lifetime in order to feel like this A/B test is clear. But with some of the A/B testing tools that we use, we've used Optibase, which is an app for Webflow, which has been phenomenal. We've used Crazy Egg, we've used PostHog as well. And all 3 of those have their own math or algorithms behind the scenes that are telling you when something is statistically significant. And normally it's like, I don't know, you need like 50 to 100 conversion events in order for each variant for it to start to feel significantly or statistically significant. So for example, if we're optimizing on trial creations, a good baseline is like, we want to see 100 trials created before for each one of the variants before we can kind of sign this off and say that this was, version A versus version B was the winner. But I kind of feel like it's all a pseudoscience a little bit. Most of the time when we're running experiments, the A and B versus C, like they're not kind of jockeying with each other. Immediately one starts to show as the winner, and you can call it, you could have called it a month earlier, but you gave it a month just to be sure. And that's fine. But most of the time it's not going to like change the outcome by giving it more time.
I think every time I've done this, and I did a fair bit of this stuff back when I used to run an agency, and you will often, like the trade-off that you've got to make is, do I keep on running this experiment and throw more traffic at it just to be sure? Or are we, is this directionally accurate? I think is the term for it, right? Does this look like this is probably going to be the winner? We don't know exactly by how much, but this one looks like it's better than this one. So let's do that. And because you've got to, I think as an early stage startup, you've got to kind of make a judgment call somewhere along the line. You can't run every experiment because you just don't have the traffic, or it would cost you too much money or take too long. Second question on that is just, do you have preferred traffic sources for running these sorts of experiments? Do you just treat all traffic the same? Do you isolate it with, say, Google ad traffic or something like that? Do you have a preference in terms of traffic source?
I don't have a preference, but I have noticed that there are differences in behaviors for different traffic sources. For example, this client of ours, Senja, they're awesome. Go create an account with them. Really fun team. So we redid their site. This is the new version that we created, and it heavily leverages kind of their whole theme, which is social proof and using your customer testimonials. So a lot of their headlines that we used are actually quotes from customers, which is kind of fun. And you can see that this follows a lot of the same sections and approach that we use for Conversion Factory, which has worked well. And for them, they just went off of like all their traffic, 100% of their traffic. We have another client who only wanted to test traffic on referral traffic. So it'd be like from review sites, from, sort of unknown links. You know how in Google Analytics, they'll just say like, ref equals, and there's like a bazillion random things, all of those, right? And what we saw actually was that the change that we made with their new hero section in particular only made a difference from referral traffic. All the other basically like warm traffic that they were getting through SEO didn't make a difference. And I think actually that had to do with kind of the brand equity that they had. That's just a theory, but I don't have a preference, but they definitely do behave differently. We have another client, we did an A/B test where this is actually before they started working with us, but we've kind of continued with that, where they found that optimizing based off of trial creations versus trial conversions yielded significantly different results as far as like what worked. And actually, crazily enough, I can't say who they are because I don't have permission from them, but they ended up removing the primary call to action in their hero section to force people to learn more about their product by scrolling down through the page. Again, it's not Senja, it's a different person, but they forced them to scroll further down the page and then create a trial, which they saw increase the trial conversion rate for those people. And at the end of the day, it was a dip in new trial creations, but it ended up creating new trial conversions and net new customers, more new net new customers month over month. So some things are counterintuitive, and it totally depends on the traffic source and the preconceived notions people have and your competitors and your onboarding flow and all these different types of things. But I will take all the traffic that I can get personally, so I don't have like a preference.
Geez, that's a ballsy move, isn't it? Let's just remove the call to action from the hero section. Yeah. That feels like it goes completely against logic, but I guess it just goes to show you, if in doubt, test it. That's amazing. Corey, just before we wrap things up, are there any other tools or books or resources that you would recommend to other SaaS founders, just in general? It doesn't have to be necessarily related to.
I mean, personally, I love Webflow. We're big Webflow fans over at Conversion Factory, just because we found that it's the best way to build websites that leave your product and development team to just work on the product and engineering. And that way you can just loop in a designer to work on the website, and you can iterate so much faster. I remember At a previous company I was working for, I would scope out the copy and get the design done for a new page, but then it would go into a queue for developers to code up to publish on the website, and it would sit in that queue for months sometimes. With Webflow, you can publish daily. You know what I mean? Like, it totally democratizes the access to marketers being able to experiment, A/B test, publish new pages, create marketing material, SEO, all those types of things. And we use Optibase for A/B testing, which has been great. As far as like books and resources, I'm a huge April Dunford stan. So I love her books. Obviously Awesome and Sales Pitch. Both of those have been really, really instrumental for me. And yeah, those are normally like my go-tos whenever I'm like, these are the musts that you got to have.
Fantastic. And Corey, if anyone is interested in working with you or wants to get in touch, what's the best way for people to do that?
My personal site has links to all of my projects and businesses and things that I've created, and it's corey.co. So I have a book that I'm working on. I have my agency, Conversion Factory, for SaaS companies. I have a couple SaaS tools in the works, like Commence was one of them, for example. My agency website is conversionfactory.co, and then my newsletter is swipefiles.com for all things cutting edge, sometimes crazy marketing tactics.
Thank you so much, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Awesome.